So hello everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to present the Erasmus Plus Teacher Academy SciLMi to you. That looks interesting. So at EduNet Europe, it is our mission to empower teachers for today's challenges and tomorrow's opportunities. And this is exactly what we do in the Erasmus Plus Teacher Academy SciLMi. So it stands for Meta-Scientific Literacies in the Misinformation Age, and you will understand in a bit what that means exactly. If you don't know what Erasmus Plus Teacher Academies are, it's a relatively new project type in Key Action 2 with the goal to create networks of communities of practice on teacher education. And communities of practice implies that there are people involved with very different kinds of expertise. So in our project, for example, there are language experts, there are media and literacy experts, there are critical thinking experts, there are experts on civics education, there are teachers, there are teacher educators, and so on, that collaborate. And we are supposed to co-create and offer courses for pre- and in-service teachers on topics such as learning in the digital world, here we go, sustainability, equality, and inclusion. We develop and test different models of mobility for initial teacher education and teacher professional development. And finally, the goal is to make mobility an integral part of teacher education in Europe. And these networks and communities of practice that we create are supposed to be turned into sustainable networks and relationships over time. And I'm going to show you how we do this in SciLMi. And basically this list, which is taken from the program guide, will also guide us through this presentation. So let's start with our community of practice, which consists of 6 universities, 1 research institute, 2 foundations, and 1 NGO. What you can't see here is the teachers, but we actually have a lot of teachers as part of our core team. 2 in my team, 2 in Fakta Bari's team, 2 in University of Innsbruck's team, and 2 in NTNU's team. So together with our associated partners network, you remember, we are spread quite nicely all across Europe, which I believe is very important if you want to make a lasting impact. But obviously, it's not about the organizations, it's about the people in the project, right? People who make the project live. And you may recognize some faces, at least one, and if you don't recognize the faces, you may recognize some names there. So, but what is it all about? Let's start at the very beginning. We live in an era of digital transformation, right? Clicks are changing the world, we all know that, and very often for the better. They have brought us closer together. We can collaborate across borders in Zoom meetings. All of that has become very, very normal. So many upsides. But when there's an upside, there's typically also a downside. And the downside is that with just 1 click, information can be spread much faster than it can actually be fact-checked. And the result is that there's a lot of mis- and disinformation out there, which obviously causes a huge problem to our societies. And during the pandemic, for example, we could observe in real time, so to speak, what mis- and disinformation can do to societies. It created rifts within the society, sometimes even among friends. And I don't think it's exaggerated to say that mis- and disinformation poses one of the greatest threats to democracy at our times. In this case, it was socio-scientific misinformation that was spread, and it created so much uncertainty. People didn't know what to do, and ultimately, it also created a lot of mistrust in science. And this is particularly unfortunate at a time. This mistrust in science, this is not moving, okay. The mistrust in science is particularly unfortunate at a time when we face so many global challenges. Global challenges such as climate migration, waste pollution, atmospheric pollution, and so on, that can only be solved with the help of science and if and when we trust their advice and follow their advice. What are called socio-scientific issues all have in common is that they're open-ended problems that have a huge societal impact, that concern all of us. There's always a controversy surrounding them and always an ethical dimension, so it also comes down to us and what we decide to do. And finally, there is no easy fix. They're very hard to solve. They're always just diverse potential solutions that impact some parts of society in different ways from other parts. And given that there are potential solutions and no easy fix basically means that there is no ultimate truth. There are only informed opinions. And this is where it comes full circle. If there's so much mis- and disinformation out there, what we have is mis- and disinformed people. So what does that mean for our societies? It's a huge, huge problem and challenge. So huge that mis- and disinformation is considered or was judged the most severe global risk that our societies face at our time, right now in the next 2 years. And when we look at the next 10 years, so over this time, mis- and disinformation, the risk that mis- and disinformation pose is only outranked by environmental issues such as extreme weather events, critical change to Earth systems, and so on, which are prime examples of socio-scientific issues. So, taking all of this into account, we believe that one of the most important questions the education system has to answer in the next few years is how we can empower all learners to act as competent and effective democratic citizens in a world that is flooded by mis- and disinformation. And this is actually what our Teacher Academy project sets out to do and help to answer. Clearly, we need to rethink education to some extent. With internet and artificial intelligence, information has become readily accessible. The teacher is no longer the main source of knowledge, right? This has changed. And with the many global challenges that we face, they don't have single discipline solutions. However, our school systems are still divided up into different subjects. So what we need to do is to help learners within our existing systems, that's what we have to deal with, to think outside the box and across subject boundaries, to contextualize their knowledge and to link their knowledge to these problems that we have in our world, such as these socio-scientific issues. And finally, to integrate their knowledge with those 21st century skills we heard about yesterday. And we are proposing a way of doing this, a very practical way I would like to add. So a cross-disciplinary approach, and this is reflected in the term meta-scientific literacies, which we've coined. Meta means that it's not about scientific knowledge, it's about how to deal with science-related information in the interest of society. So this is what meta-scientific literacies stand for. Oh, and SciLMi, obviously this is a wordplay on skill me. Give me the skills I need in the misinformation age. And we have developed a model of meta-scientific literacies that takes into account all the different competencies that are out there and that you all know very well. What we've done is we have reorganized them in a way that is hopefully very practical to teachers, or for teachers. So they follow the way we deal with information in our daily lives. Open up your mind basically deals with encountering information or searching for information, finding information, or just coming across information in your social media feeds. What you need to know is how, which snippet you want to click on, right? And you need our children, our young adults, they need to learn that. Which information or which snippets, which, what are they called, posts in your social media feed, you should ignore even though they look so attractive and you want to click on them. And they need to know which sources to trust, obviously. And then when you actually click on such a post, you get to the information itself. And we heard in one of the previous talks that critically analyzing information will be one of the most important skills that we need in the next few years with AI being around and so on. And this is exactly what Domain 2 is about. It is about differentiating between fact and opinion, identifying biased information, analyzing the logical consistency of information, something AI is not good at, right? And selecting the most informative and relevant insights. And once you have read about the different viewpoints on a socio-scientific issue, you get to the point where you can make up your own mind, which is obviously the prerequisite for you to acting as a democratic citizen. You need to know where you stand. And to figure that out involves knowing where everybody else stands, so what everybody else believes in and thinks. This is what the third domain is about. You need to know the impacts that socio-scientific issues and their potential solutions have on different parties across society. Some may benefit from some of the solutions, while they may not be as good for others. And then finally, you need to weigh, your wishes, what is important to you, against those dimensions. And that sometimes leads to us taking decisions which may not be in the best interest of societies. Many of us flew in here, even though we know very, very well that flying is maybe not the best thing to do in today's world. Still, we do it. That is part of this weighing process and arriving at what you decide to do. And then once you have figured out where you stand, you can actually speak out and take action and exercise civic engagement, which is the ultimate goal. All of these competences that you have seen so far are surrounded by those European values that this conference is about. And there's a two-way relationship between the values and the competences. On the one hand, the competences reflect those values. They're informed by them, shaped by them. On the other hand, when students actually practice these competencies, they also nurture the values and they develop those values over time, hopefully. So the values are very much involved in our framework, I would say. At this point, the framework is quite abstract, and this is what the teachers in our project kept pointing out. They told us, but how is it done? They kept asking, how? That is really the most important question that was on their minds, and it became very important for us to bridge, or to find a bridge between theory and practice. While the first version of the framework was developed based on a scoping literature review, the next step was then to really figure out how it is done in practice and how to make this framework appealing to teachers. And the way we did it is to break down the competences further and further into smaller and smaller units that can be integrated more and more easily into everyday lessons. So first we broke them down into the learning objectives. These are what you saw on the previous slides. The learning objectives were then broken down further into learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes were broken down into hows. These are the concrete steps that learners actually need to take to reach a given learning outcome. and that at the same time, they guide the teachers in developing learning opportunities, which allow the learners to take these steps. So this is where it becomes very, very practical, and we kept the term how because it really reflects, we believe, the need of the teachers, the real need the teachers have. So let's take a look what that looks like in practice. Domain 2, let's zoom in, identify biased information. So, learning objective, learning goal. In order to identify biased information, learners need to identify manipulation strategies, for example. And these are just excerpts, right? There are more outcomes and more hows there. But what I want to show you here is that we try very hard to, or the teachers try very hard to link those hows to the different classrooms. Because the idea is that if every teacher in every class now and then incorporates such a how here and there, over time, the students will develop those literacies, while the teachers don't have to change too much in their regular teaching. So, in order to identify manipulation strategies, they do that by, for example, examining the use of rhetorical devices. This is something that can be done very easily in a language subject, obviously. Identifying sensational emotional language, as well language subject. But it could also be visuals. This is something that they could do in an art subject. If there's music involved, TikTok video, for example, in the information source, then it could be something that could be done in music, what music does to us and how it influences the way we perceive information. Then, identify deceptive tactics, for example, involves checking if the information presents multiple viewpoints or if it is one-sided. This is something that could, for example, be done in an ethics class and integrated rather easily there. Evaluating whether the author or messenger might have a motive, such as financial benefit and so on. This is something that could, for example, be done in an economics class. So this goes to show that the idea is that you can incorporate these small sub-competencies, the hows, in different subjects without them taking too much time, without them messing up, with the regular teaching, and without involving too much preparatory work. Because it will only work if teachers do not have to reinvent their teaching from scratch. It will only work if we come up with solutions that can be incorporated into everyday teaching. Only then, and we know that, we will do it, right? We can't do a project every day, so it needs to be something that is compatible with our daily work. What is really important in our approach is that the subject-specific learning goals, which we need to teach anyway, right? This is what we do. They remain unchanged. What we try to show you is how meta-scientific literacies can be woven into your everyday teaching and complement those subject-specific learning goals. And actually, by including them, the subject-specific competencies can be deepened, so you actually benefit from doing this little bit of extra work. And finally, we try to show you how subject knowledge can be connected with interdisciplinary learning, how to bridge, the gaps between different subjects. And the glue that can be used to link different subjects together are those socioscientific issues in our context. So, here is an example how 4 teachers can actually establish links between the different subjects without changing too much. An ICT teacher could look at the credibility of a website, platform, or media outlet that contains a given piece of information that is then, for example, used by the biology teacher, and the biology teacher looks at the logical consistency of the information. Then, the civics education teacher looks at the same information from yet another perspective. In this case, by for example, identifying the parties across society that are affected in a positive or negative way. And finally, the language teacher can take all of the information that the students have learned or worked with in the previous subjects, previous lessons, to help them tailor their message to a specific audience, something that they would teach anyway. So this goes to show how you can do a very low prep interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary teaching in today's school systems. I mentioned the checklist before, or I didn't, I can't remember, but you saw the checklist symbols. So we don't stop at this how level. We also provide lots of help for the teachers to integrate the hows into their lessons. There are socio-scientific issue briefs which introduce the different impacts, different solutions, the parties affected, the way-offs that we talked about to help the teachers integrate those ideas into their regular teaching. There is information how to include all learners. And the inclusion team has done a brilliant job here. And what I really like especially about that part is that on the one hand, you get very practical advice on how to help students that may face extra challenges. But at the same time, you're also told that these students have, can add some benefits, some added value to your classroom because they also have strengths that you can build on in the class. So it's not just their needs, it's also their strengths that come up or is featured in that section. Then we have many digital activities, AI prompt libraries, etc., which may also be very relevant, for example, for youth projects or for adult education. You can use these materials there as well, even though they have been designed for secondary teaching. And all of these theoretical information is always linked to practical examples developed by fellow teachers. So the lesson plans, the SciLMified lesson plans, which are very regular lessons that are just tweaked a little bit to also foster meta-scientific literacies. And what we've done with the competencies, breaking them down further and further, we've also done with our trainings that we've developed. So we've broken them down into modules that you can integrate into existing teacher training courses. You don't have to do the full set, you can also just pick out one specific module. We have core modules that are very much related to our framework, and then we have different focus modules. For example, to feature media and information literacy, or to put an emphasis on critical thinking, or to put an emphasis on creating inclusive classrooms. And I'm very happy to say that this is very much in line with the EU Action Plan and also the PISA tests, because PISA 2025 actually focuses on researching, evaluating, and using scientific information for decision-making and action. And PISA 2029 focuses on AI literacy and media and information literacy. So exactly what we do. In our trainings, we have piloted all the trainings, the pre-service teacher education course in Santiago. To give you some expression, these are very, very learner-centered courses. This is what I love about them. In 15 years or over 15 years of teaching at universities, I've never had the privilege and the joy to teach a course like that, because you simply don't have the time to prepare so many materials. And as one person, you don't come up with so many ideas. So these are really, really great courses. Then, I have like 2 more minutes. Then the 3 teacher trainings, and the really good thing is, so it's the same, they showed it hopefully as well. What we really like about them is that we managed to get participants from over 16 countries in one teacher training. And the feedback was that that was really valuable for the teachers. And the good thing is that you can participate as well. So next year there are more teacher trainings, both for pre-service teachers and for in-service teachers, where you can actually apply even if your school hasn't been accredited yet. And because we have the funding in the Teacher Academy to invite you to the training, and you've got the links here. And if you don't want to participate digitally, you can also just write your name there, and you'll be informed once the official application period starts. That's it. And finally, to keep that all going, let me skip that part. That is interesting for the higher education people. You can use KA1 funding to actually keep the BIPs going. But we also have this hub to make it really last. And we have a really beautiful platform which you can get access to, where you can easily find partner schools, people who have the same interests as you do. You find virtual booths of the project partners, but also of other teacher academies, of other cooperation projects that have also developed good materials for you to use in the classrooms. So let's make mobility the engine of teacher education, and I hope to see many of you next year in Athens if you are a teacher trainer, and in Budapest if you are a practicing teacher. See you next year, and thank you for your attention.